It's an actual thing, is that right, Karen?
Yes, it's a condition.
A condition that is given to who by who?
It's an injury. It's a subcategory of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's an injury that happens with psychic on psychic trauma. That means if I'm mean to you, you may develop over a period of time post-traumatic stress disorder. If that's done in the legal system, that would be legal abuse syndrome.
I mean, what do I look like when I'm walking around with legal abuse syndrome?
You look just fine for the most part, and so people don't understand the injury very well. But you probably are having a lot of trouble sleeping. You're probably what we call hypervigilant, which means you can never relax. You're checking your windows, you're looking over your shoulder. Perhaps you can't go get your own mail. Yes, it will interfere with concentration. The symptoms will come with reminders. Very often, a car backfiring would remind somebody of a battlefield.
Right.
Or people, some of my clients will drive miles around the courthouse on the way to soccer practice because they can't tolerate seeing the same streets where they had a bad experience. I've worked on this so long, Dennis. I started this in the 80s. Wow. I did 7 years of peer review before I wrote anything. I wrote papers, I held more than 200 presentations with doctors, with psychiatrists, various groups of my colleagues. That one. The court is a place where we create perception. And perception is what lawyers do well. They create a perception to win for their client. And since the term zealous came into the picture, it seems like anything they need to do to create the perception is what they do. And lying is power, Dennis. Lying is terrific power. So when you want to establish a power differential, which is what they want to do in the courtroom, they want to make themselves more powerful, more acceptable, and the perception of them in a winning posture. And so absolutely, lying is done all the time. The biggest problem that the people had that reported on that survey was the lying in the courtroom, was the lying. That's what made them sick. That's what made them feel helpless. That's what injured them.
Isn't there some kind of, first of all, I hope you heard that, because a justice system is just supposed to be that, justice.
Now, what's happening in the courtroom when the physiology changes? I'll bet you, and I can pretty well point out other times that I've been in the courtroom with clients, it's when the lies are happening, because you're helpless against a lie. Post-traumatic stress disorder comes from feeling helpless and jeopardized at the same time, and not able to do anything about it. That comes into play. Once you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you then are entitled to accommodations in any public setting under Title II. So the courtroom is a public setting. So what we do is, just like they do in schools and businesses, is I'm an accommodations designer that comes in and tries to design what do you need so you're a little more empowered, so you feel better in this courtroom, so you're able to function better. To us. Very important consideration, because many times people are afraid they'll be considered mentally ill if they admit to post-traumatic stress disorder.
Well, it is that vision out there that people have in their minds.
Right.
I've been there, and so as far as war, I can speak about that, but I have not heard it called an injury. I've always heard it called a mental disorder.
Well, it's a psychic injury, actually, because something has to be wrong out there. The number one thing I wanted to do when I wrote the book is let all these people I was working with know they are not crazy. And a whole host of things happen. When you were talking about lying, it goes worse than lying. It goes into altering your concept of rationality. This leaks down from wartime, when certain people were given the job of breaking down prisoners, breaking down the psychological makeup of the prisoner. They were taught to disrupt their rationality, to cause them to think that stop is go and go is stop, and know you're wrong, and keep them tired and wear them down. And while they're off balance mentally, people will admit to things they didn't even do. they'll admit to things to get some rest, you know. So now it's, gosh, maybe I am wrong. Maybe what I've called an apple all my life really was an orange. Maybe my parents lied to me.
Yeah.
I mean, they really mess with your brain. And this occurs all the time in the courtroom. So you are on a battlefield, but it's psychic on psychic, not physical. So you're caught really, you don't have a rifle there. You know, you got your mouth and your brain and your ability to communicate. The minute you get post-traumatic stress disorder, you can't concentrate, you can't communicate well. You try and open your mouth, one of those big lies comes at you, and you open your mouth and all you get are the flashbacks, the intrusions, all those things that come with PTSD. And that's one thing I really want to clarify about legal abuse syndrome, because legal abuse syndrome is an implosion. A very small handful of people will lose it and act out.
Yeah.
Almost all people with legal abuse syndrome, it goes inward. And those people retire to in front of the TV. They no longer socialize. Their life is just on medium, low, or low for the rest of their life. And they're disillusioned and they're heartbroken.
But
they want to get you riled. They want to get you off your game.
you mean it's their intention to?
You bet. It's creating perception of you being the loser, them being the winner. And you being wrong and them being right.
Regardless of the facts.
Right, exactly. But what we do have is the truth and the law, and that's what I stand by.
Evaluation. The only model we have is ourselves. And so the judgment has to come from, would we do that? No, but how do you judge if somebody else did that and you can't compute or you can't live with that?
You're asking me about the different steps to getting better. Mm-hmm. Part of it is called de-shaming, where you get rid of the guilt you're feeling and you put the shame where it belongs. But part of that is understanding what motivates a human being. And all human beings are motivated either more by conscience or more by power. If you're motivated by conscience, what you do is the right thing every day. You love doing the good thing. You have a sense of joy. You love raising your kids. You love seeing a beautiful scenery. If you are out for power only, you get up in the morning and all you can think of is more power and more power. And you're driven by an insatiable sense of envy. That's about 10 to 15% of the population, and they'll go into the sociopathic range of human beings. What's happened in our culture, though, is that 10 to 15% taking the power positions and working their way up in the corporations is employing many of the 85% of the conscience-centered people who would never hurt someone meaning to. So the doors are closing on women that get abused, from therapy to law to the courts to any proceedings. That nobody wants to hear it. It's a place where everyone's uncomfortable, they feel helpless, they don't know what to do, and it's out of control. Okay, there's something that will linger after the end of any relationship. After a divorce, what usually is the pain that lingers is the loss of the friend. In this case, what lingers is the loss of a sense that one human just couldn't do that to another. How can one person treat another person that way? How can they do it? And that's what lingers.